just take a look at the situation now. Don't forget what happened. I'd like to say about that. Right now, what's happening, actually this came out in WikiLeaks, some of the most important revelations there had to do with cables that the American ambassador in Pakistan is sending back to Washington, Ambassador Patterson. She's quite supportive of the Afghan-Pakistan operations of the United States. But she did point out a problem. The problem is, first of all, Pakistan is an extreme, maybe probably the most dangerous place in the world. Pakistan has huge nuclear weapons capacity, which is growing very fast, maybe the fastest growing anywhere. It's been accelerated by the U.S.-India nuclear treaty from a couple of years ago, which Obama supported, which essentially grants India is not a signer of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. India, Israel, and Pakistan are three non-signers. This essentially amounts to support of the United States for India's nuclear weapons program. That's not the way they put it, but if you think it through, that's what it amounts to, and Pakistan understands that. So they're, in reaction, building up their own nuclear forces. That's one tendency in Pakistan, nuclear weapons. The other is radical Islamization. It's not a majority of the population, but there's a strong radical Islamic movement, and it's not just tribal areas. You've seen the reactions to there are a couple of assassinations of the leading figures recently, one a couple of days ago, who opposed the blasphemy laws, and they were assassinated. And there's huge public support for the assassins, okay, including reformist elements. So these lawyers who were demonstrating to overthrow Musharraf and reform the government, they're supporting the assassin, demonstrating support of the assassin. These are powerful tendencies. Well, both of these are among Ronald Reagan's gift to the world. In the 1980s, and Thatcher was sort of going along with them. In the 1980s, Pakistan was ruled by the most vicious of the rotten dictators it's had, and he had two major policies. One, developing nuclear weapons. The other, radical Islamization. And he was strongly supported by the United States and Britain. The U.S. pretended that they didn't know that he was developing nuclear weapons, which is, of course, nonsense, so they could keep supporting him. And the Islamization was with Saudi funding. Saudi Arabia, since the early 60s, has been kind of like on a missionary kick to spread radical Islam to the rest of the world, with strong British support all the way through the U.S. too. And this reached Pakistan in the 80s. That's these famous madrasas where kids don't do anything but study the Quran and learn about jihad. And that's changed to a younger generation. All right, anyway, these two things converge. What it means is that there's an immense nuclear weapons system, and there's a powerful radical Islamist movement, and they interact among the tens of thousands of people working in the nuclear weapons system. There's a fair number of radical Islamists. Pakistani nuclear physicists, Goodman, say that it's not impossible that fissile materials will be taken by these people undetectably, in small quantities, and could turn into a jihadi bomb, nuclear bomb going off in London or New York. Well, and what Patterson points out in these cables is that the U.S. policies are contributing to this. But Pakistan is strongly anti-American, overwhelmingly, and that includes the military, the one stable force. And U.S. actions in Afghanistan and Pakistan, like drone attacks or pressuring the Pakistani army to go into the tribal areas, or just a couple of weeks ago, the assassination by this U.S. CIA agent, Raymond Davis, of two people, just plain assassination. In Pakistan, it's believed that the two people he killed were ISI agents, were trailing him, intelligence agents. I don't know if it's true, but it's what's believed, and it's what matters. All things like that are seriously antagonizing not only the Pakistani population, but even the stable force that's kind of holding the country together, military and intelligence. And what just a couple of years ago, even at that time, Patterson pointed out that this is leading to the possibility where there might be a nuclear weapons in the hands of jihadis. I mean, that's a frightening consequence. A serious mainstream analysts are quite concerned about it. There's an article which you might take a look at. You can probably pick it up on the web by Anatol Lievin. He's a very highly respected foreign policy analyst who works mostly on Pakistan, knows it very well. He goes through some of this, and it's in the national interest, conservative foreign policy journal. He points, what his kind of punchline in the article is that American and British soldiers are dying in Afghanistan in order to make the world more dangerous for Britain and the United States. And that's quite apart from the concerns that you probably raised. Do we have any right to do that in the first place? This isn't just straight practical grounds of practical consequences.
Okay, we are coming quite close to chucking out time now. There was one question I wanted to put from the pre-submitted questions, because it comes from Adam Johannes, who is a great local mover and shaker and activist. And he asks, it's quite a long question, but the gist is, do you agree that enforcing a no-fly zone over Libya now, I mean Americans and British and other European powers, would that be a genuine help or an aid to the those who are trying to overthrow, or is it just another expression of Western commercial and diplomatic interests?
Well, first, before we think it's a hard question, I don't think I have a simple answer, unlike some of my friends that do. But we should be clear about what's going on. The immediate concern, allegedly, is the humanitarian crisis. But that's pretty hard to believe. There are humanitarian crises all over the place that the EU NATO never thinks about trying to stop. In fact, often they're carrying them out. Furthermore, if you think for a minute, there's a very simple way of stopping the humanitarian crisis. The rebels can call off the revolution. So what's really at stake is, should NATO support the revolution? Should it support the revolution or not? Should it support the rebellion against the government? That's what's actually at stake. Well, of course, if the rebellion goes on, there's going to be a brutal reaction. There already is on the part of Gaddafi. So there is a humanitarian issue, but it's the actual issue is, should the West support the rebellion? Okay, if you want to think about it seriously, you can't put aside the central issue, which is not discussed. Well, you've got to make your own decision about that, but I think a case can be made for a no-fly zone. A case could be made, I don't necessarily say it's right, because there is a humanitarian